It's almost 4 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. I appreciate all y'all joining. This was, we're talking through topics and all that, and for classes. And I'm an innovator by nature. I like to talk about iterations and things that are coming up and all that. So I was saying, let's talk about the future of the hobby. I started in 2016, and things have changed wildly since then. I was on the vendor room with Boscoyo earlier, and just seeing like the old 48 node snowflakes, and that's what mine looked like back in the day. And they're still got, their purpose and are great. But now, I've got snowflakes on the house with like 450 pixels and they're backlit. And, I've got controllers that'll go out there and, tell you how much power are you drawing, and, different iterations of everything. I'll count the pixels on a string, and when I started just less than 10 years ago, you're out there configuring things with spreadsheets, manually calculating channels, and it was a lot harder. And so through the community growing, through great work of a lot of individuals here, that stuff has iterated quickly and gotten so much better. And it's really lowered the barrier to entry, I think, to the hobby, where more and more people, it used to be geeks and engineers only, and now, you're seeing a lot more adoption, a lot more ease. And that comes through the work of a ton of people. And so I wanted to kind of talk about that, of not just, not where we've been necessarily, but what's next? What's the next 3 to 5 years? What do we see coming? There's a lot of buzzwords like AI, and and how can, the pixel fire gate, and how can we make things safer? Different things like that. Where are we going? Where are we headed? What do we see in the future? And not necessarily, that we know all the answers, but the trends and the feelings and the vision of where we're going. And so originally I had this scheduled for 50 minutes, and I was quickly warned by a lot of people that's not going to be enough time. So then I doubled it to 100 minutes, and then I was warned that's not going to be enough time. So we're going to start today. And I'd like to acknowledge there's tons of experts in the hobby, tons of brilliant vendors, tons of brilliant sequencers, tons of brilliant developers. There's tons of people here that make our world tick, and there's not any way you can thank them all and acknowledge them all and all that. So I was just quickly trying to go through and say, let's pull 5 or 6 people in from across the hobby that can speak to these things. And so that's kind of what we've done. So once again, there's a ton of people out there. I think this will open the door to future conversations. I had no idea at the time. Thought it'd just be a fun thing. But once I, kind of announced it, there was a lot of interest. I got a lot of messages about, different people's views and different approaches, and how other contributions have affected things. So I think it opens the door to future conversations. So I don't think this is the end, or a single threaded conversation. I think it, opens the door to more. But anyway, with that being said, I had 6 people join me today that are, all experts in the field, and they have different areas of expertise. And I'll kind of introduce them. Clyde Lindsay was, first of all, with Pixel Pro Displays. He's an expert sequencer. I think they opened one of the first sequence stores out there, and there were some, earlier ones. They had one of the first sequence memberships out there. And he's put out tons of training and tons of videos out there, hundreds of hours of stuff, of content, of, lights, and help people learn how to sequence. He's taught at a ton of minis and all that. They're involved in both the residential and commercial sector, and they just have a lot of insight, I think, as to where, we might be going on that end of things. And so Clyde, once again, he agreed to help me when I was at 50 minutes. He's got another obligation at 5, so we're gonna have to get him in and out pretty quick. But to that, I asked Tom Betgeorge to join us from the sequencing angle as well, to fill in that extra hour. And he's here as well now, to stay on for the whole thing. Tom's one of the most recognizable, I think, homes in the hobby. I think we've all seen his house, and he's got millions and millions of views on YouTube. He's been featured on probably every major TV network out there. I know Good Morning America, all the morning shows. And really, you see this question every year: what inspired you to get into the hobby? Tom Betgeorge is one of the ones out there. He's one of the ones I list. He's one of my pixel heroes. And so, Tom has inspired a lot of us to get into the hobby. You see some really cool show, every year somebody I think y'all have seen this. Every year somebody will forward you his house and be like, "Oh man, you need to do this. This is so cool." And you're like, "Yeah, yeah." So I'm like, "I'm not Tom. I can't do that." But he also runs a sequence store, so has a lot of vision with sequencing and all that. Um, and he also designs commercial shows, sells hardware, and does a lot of different things. So I think from as a content creator, as a sequencer, as a commercial guy, and as a someone who develops and sells hardware, he's got a lot of insight. So he's one of our panelists today. Jackie Elliott with EFL Designs. He's a prop developer that's on the forefront of what we're doing in Coro. We've got a lot of great Coro guys out there, and once again, there's a lot to pull from. But if we had every single person sitting here, it wouldn't be, we wouldn't be able to move. So I think he understands X-Lights deeply. One of the things I've always respected about Jackie is when you go in the Zoom rooms, he's there as a civilian, not really as a vendor per se. He's always helping people out with their displays and answering a lot of questions. And he's got a deep, deep knowledge of not only props and Coro, but what he does with the submodels. Because when you look at some of Jackie's models, he's got 100 submodels, and he really understands how X Lights affects those things. I mean, I've put videos out there before, and he'll send me a message. He'll like, "Hey, dude, that looks pretty good, but you don't have your shadows right and your shaders right, and this and that," and really understands how the software interacts with the props and what makes it look good. So I think from the prop angle of things, he really understands where things are headed and understands how that coincides with the with the software and knows how that works. So he's here from that angle. Keith Wesley is obviously one of the lead developers of X-Lights, and he's been part of that team since 2015. And Keith's made a ton of improvements. I know stuff that we've talked about late nights in Zoom early on. He's there listening and asking questions and seeing how people use the software and has a real interest in that. And you'd see in software releases just a few weeks later, he would take those comments and those ideas and those problems and implement it into a new feature. And so he's got a keen, huge working knowledge of X-Lights. Obviously, he knows knows it in and out, maybe better than anybody. And so he's got a lot of vision of what the software is, where it's going, spends countless hours developing and learning and all that. And once again, he's not by himself. There's many great X-Lights developers, all who donate their time. But he was willing to serve on our panel today, and we appreciate him here from the X-Light side of things. Minor Mendoza runs Your Pixel store. And so he's a trusted vendor in our hobby. And I think he's always looking for ways to improve things. I know I've gotten packages in the mail before saying, "Hey man, I want to make pixels better. I know you've had some problems. Just go and abuse these things as much as you can and give me feedback." And you're like, "Okay." So always looking for iterative things and trying to make things better and look to improve and add quality and value as the hobby grows. He's got a lot of unique products. I mean, just this week, I think he released some kind of RGB leg lamp and different things. So as the hobby grows, it's not just pixels as we know it. And they're developing different form factors, and what's the future of seed pixels, and what's the future with other things. So I think he's got a lot of views there, and kind of where else can we use those. I know they're developing landscape lighting and different year-round lighting and things like that. So where are we headed? And you see that a lot even now with like moving heads and things like that, where that was really hot and rare a few years ago, and it's becoming more and more commonplace as more and more people offer them. Costs come down, sequence vendors are starting to offer them. So what iterations are we seeing like that in the future? I think we're seeing, we saw the density era kind of come along where props got more and more dense. Now I think we're seeing more and more kind of moving props and things like that with moving heads and different animatronics. So where do we see the hardware angle going? And then finally, from a controller aspect, I meant to mention this too. Keith not only develops X-Lights, but develops the firmware for Falcon controllers. So he's a part of the Falcon controller team along with David Pitts. And so he has a lot of insight there as far as how the software interacts with the hardware and the controller angle. David Peace is here from Experience Lights. He's always pushed the envelope and innovated. I've always appreciated what David's done from the controller side of things. He kind of broke ground with pixel to things, making it easy to interact with AC things, AC props, as well as servos and different things like that. The Genius controller line, his Pixel controller line, has been, I always thought, very innovative as far as the software features that are there, as well as, the physical layout now, the connectors he's using and the way it bolts directly to a board without a mounting plate. He's also got other products like Clickets, so, where it's become easier to splice props or splice dead pixels and things like that. So anyway, that's our panelists today. I don't want to belabor all that, but very happy to have all these folks here. They all said, yes, we'll go out there and discuss the future of lighting from our vantage point. So I'm going to stop talking. I don't want to hear from me. I'm just here to moderate. We're going to start out with just going through these folks. And if you would go and introduce yourself, tell us how long you've been in the hobby and kind of where you're coming from. What's your vantage point? Where are you approaching today's talk from the next 3 to 5 years? Kind of where are you with that? And we'll start with Clyde.
Thank you very much, Russell. Great introduction for everybody, by the way. So I see myself as starting the discussion today from the standpoint of, and I really hate to say this, but from the standpoint of a newbie. If you catch any of the videos, one of the things that I really try to do is I try to imagine I know absolutely as little as possible about X-Lights, and I'm explaining something from the point of I have no understanding. And I know that sounds and we've been doing this now. X-Lights has been available in its current form since 2015. And we've there's more content, there's more information out there now than ever, but there's always going to be somebody who clicks on a video and says, I don't understand how you got there. And so my brain always defaults, my auto default is always from the new person joining the group. And as far as being in the hobby, I started in the hobby back in, I want to say 2017 is whenever, I'm sorry, excuse me, 2007, whenever it was 17 or 18 years ago. And I started learning. And, just like you said, Russell, you were much inspired by Tom, as many of us are. I'm inspired by Tom as well. I was first inspired by Carson Williams, and also Richard Holdman. Those were the two people who had contributed something that was quite a bit something that was quite a bit more big than just your everyday. At the time, back in 2007, a video going viral was a big thing. Videos weren't shared via instant messenger. Well, they were, I guess they were the early instant messengers like AOL instant messenger and stuff, and Yahoo chat and stuff like that. But seeing that you could instantly change the direction of lights going from one bounce to another bounce, or a fade, and Richard Holdman's ability to make a pinwheel effect literally on his house, that really was quite incredible. And that was motivating to me. So that the vantage point I always see it from is I see it from the perspective of somebody getting started and what's the next step and how do they get there. And so every time even in today's class, I really didn't want to go into very deep topics, because I just feel like we always need to know where something begins. And sadly, it's a lot of repetition. And I think that over time, that the more you hear the same thing, and then you start hearing other small things, because what you kind of push away, and then you start to hear the other little golden nuggets, and that's what fills in the blanks. There's the connection, and the light bulbs start going off, and things like that. So I think it's a very we have such an eclectic group of people with so many diverse backgrounds. I was a restaurant manager, and there's there's teachers and programmers and human resource people, and that's who we are. We're not a specific type of person. All of us who do this, we just have varied backgrounds. We just love to see what the lights can do whenever we have control of them. So that's my goal whenever I'm working with people, and whenever I'm helping people, or whenever we're in the Zoom rooms together, is how do I get the information that they need to them, And I think for a huge shout out to the community as well, because people put things different ways, and there's so many people that do a lot of their own way of communication that bring other people on board. So
Very good. All right, cool. So next up, Tom, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us what vantage point you are coming from in today's talk.
Sure. My name is Tom. I think I'm 45 now. By the way, is my audio working? Yeah, okay,
Yep.
cool. All right, cool. I feel like I don't really represent me as much as I represent a group, right? I know people still associate me with our company Magical Light Shows, but really I'm just a herder of creative people. Like, the whole team, I feel bad even doing anything without all of them, but I'm surrounded by talented people, and I just want to mention them real quick. Stephen Petrucci, who basically just runs the company now. Matthew Phipps, Dent Earl, Elise Wood, Larson Bruntold, Michael Stofferkin helps out, Rachel Huddleston, Catherine Bayer, Keith Kelly, Lewis Spalding, Jesse Salazar, Jay Simmons, Harry Yulip. There's a lot of people who really make the team. So really all I'm doing, I'm still just a little bit of the face of it, but I'm creative director. I got into this hobby, I started in 2013. I was the director of a music conservatory. Before that, I wrote music for film and television. And I saw one of those videos. I think I saw, I don't remember his last name. My apologies, Kevin, but he did a Halloween house. And his lights got me into this hobby. And I saw a bunch of videos, and I thought the videos were really good. But coming from the music world, I'm like, man, it bothers me because I feel like things could either be timed better, or we can even do more with this technology. And that's how I kind of got into it. I got into it for fun. I actually first used it on stage at the conservatory for one of my dance groups. I use Lightorama. And then I'm like, hey, I should do this on my house. And then I used it on my house, and then eventually moved over to X Lights, and the rest is history, if you will. Um, and yeah, let's see here. I'm reading the questions, and yeah, I'm just honored to be here. I'm honored to be surrounded by a really talented team. I'm honored to be on this panel. I feel bad that I've inspired a lot of you to lose a lot of the money that you've worked hard for. My apologies there, but I think it is all fun, right? I think it's fun to just kind of push boundaries and just kind of explore. Like, I, I, I think already what we can do in the software is incredible. I think I just get a kick out of, like, what else can we combine this? How can we combine this? And sometimes I'll do it for a year, sometimes I'll continue doing it, but just seeing what we can do together, I think, is a lot of fun.
Thank you so much. All right, next we got Mr.
Kevin Judd. Yeah, someone just said it. Thank you for that.
Yeah, Kevin Judd, that's right. So, Jackie, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, how long you've been in the hobby, and what vantage point you're approaching our future talk from today?
So it began when I was born. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to go that far back. I've been in the hobby since the end of 2018. It's when I started viewing a lot of different things, and I come across a really nice Star Wars sequence that somebody had done. I'm not going to mention Tom's name, but he did it, and he owes me money still. But I got to looking at that, and I thought it was really neat. But what really drove me into this was the terrible lights that I was seeing around my area. And there were a bunch of, let's say, wireframes that were not being taken care of, right? I know you've all seen it. A good wireframe is great, but when half the pixels are out, you can only tell it's Santa Claus because it's red and white, lights on it. So, yeah, I looked at that. We were driving through a little drive-through, and my daughters were in there with me and my wife, and they were all going ooh and ah over these half-lit wireframes. And I thought, you know what? There's got to be something better than that. So I started digging in, and I found X Lights and started looking at that around 2018. And then in 2019, I went into it and started actually doing my own stuff, making my own props and doing that. That's kind of how I got started in my own designs. But back up, I'm an electrician. I'm also an electronic technician. So I have a pretty good background when it comes to understanding how all this stuff goes together. And being an electronic technician, I also look at different programs and understanding how they work, and then apply different actions to those. But I never really was, say, the person who wrote those programs. I just needed to make them work. That goes in kind of hand in hand the way I approach X lights. You got people who are developing X lights and what the capability is of X lights. So I look at it and say, what can I do with that? And that's my approach to how I design things. And just, I don't want to just throw something out there that may look something cool. I want to throw something out there that actually works really well. And I want to make sure that, when something comes out of my shop, it's ready to run. But pretty much that's it.
Well, thanks for being here today, Jackie. We appreciate it. Keith Wesley. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, how long you've been in the hobby, and what vantage point you're coming from today?
I feel like I've done that so many times. I covered it mostly off at the Mega Mini. Look, I've been controlling lights since, I don't know, the late noughties, doing lights since the early 90s. Mostly got into it from a technology perspective. I didn't start with any of the vendors. I built my own controllers initially off industrial PLCs, and then moved over, wrote my own sequencer, and did all sorts of things like that. Got into X Lights in, I think it was 2014, when I basically redid my previous controllers to run on X Lights when I decided to go to full house control, and found that X Lights didn't do some things that my old sequencing software did, and so started to poke at the code. And Sean generously just immediately gave me commit rights to the repo. And my soccer club that I was heavily involved in, that used to eat all my time, got taken over by a guy that was close to a sociopath. And so I stepped away from the soccer club and needed something else to do. And I've spent the last 10 years or so basically solving problems. Most of the work on X Lights has been about solving problems, observing people struggle with the software, listen to people, describe the things that they'd like to achieve, and finding ways to make that happen. And these days, I do the same thing with the controller side as well. Again, solving problems, looking at ways to address the challenges that people in the hobby experience. So mostly I spend my time listening and observing.
I think that's an important part of what we do. So thanks for what you do. Minor, if you would tell us a little bit about yourself, how long you've been in the hobby, and what vantage point you're bringing to the discussion today.
Hey guys, so my name is Minor. I was born and raised in South Central LA, and the playground is where I hanged most of the days. Chilling out, hanging out, maxing out all cool. I'm just joking. If you didn't know that, that's the beginning of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. But my name is Minor. I'm a vendor. I've been a vendor for about 4 years now. Somebody got it, at least somebody, 2 people got it. Great. I've been a vendor for 4 years. But I actually started running a Halloween haunt, and that's actually what brought me into the hobby as a vendor. So I was looking for some products, and there were some products that I found. I think I actually started off with Lightorama. So I bought a bunch of Lightorama stuff, and I'm like, this is exactly what I wanted. And Facebook sees the algorithm, and it took me to X Lights. And I was like, wait a second, maybe Lightorama isn't what I want. Maybe I want to go in this direction. And that's literally how I came about. The Facebook ad took me to I think it was Wired Watch. I think it was Wired Watch. I think it was a ad for Wired Watch or something. And then I was like, okay, well, let me go this way. Let me see this. Oh, wait, I see that there's stuff that's not there. Oh, wait, there's something here that I think we can do better. And that's how I became a vendor. I saw some stuff that I was like, hey, how come nobody's offering this? Or, hey, I know some stuff that, I know a way to improve that. Or, hey, I can't use that in the Halloween haunt because it's not fire code, but we can use this in the fire code. And then basically as a vendor now, I look at a lot of the products. We go to these minis and we talk to each other about, what's innovative, what we can do. And that's one of the things I love about this hobby is that everyone here, David, Ken, JR, they're all willing to talk when we go to these minis, Russell, I'm sure you've noticed that we're all willing to talk, and we, we'll go into detail of what, the things that we get to do and hang out. But definitely it's a great opportunity. Clyde, definitely Jackie, hanging out in the Zoom room. It just gives us feedback from the community, and what they're looking for. It's not really what we can offer a lot of the times, is what they're looking for. And by taking that feedback, we've been able to, I've seen not only myself, but other vendors expand. So with my background as a teacher, because Clyde mentioned that I came from a background as a teacher, but a lot of research. I'm very research oriented person. So my background is research and doing research and how to delve into solving problems, and from the origin and foundation of how do we solve that problem. And so that's my background and how I use it to help the community and doing what we do now.
All right, thanks. Finally, Mr. David Peace, tell us a little bit about yourself, what's your background, and then where you're approaching today's talk from.
Yeah, so hey, I'm David Peace with Experience Lights. I started in 2014 with an AC show, made my own controllers. We were just talking about this in the last talk with Osh Park, the purple PCBs back in the day. Started off with the Vixen, which I really still, I love their UI. I thought they did a really good job on the UX, but their power was a little bit lacking and ultimately migrated over to X Lights. But I was posting videos to YouTube, got contacted by the Great Christmas Light Fight to be on the show. And by the time we were done filming the Great Christmas Light Fight, I was thoroughly convinced, because I knew nobody in the hobby, 0 people. I was convinced I was the only person in Southern California doing a light show. And I was like, yeah, this is just, I'm the only one. And started a Facebook group for the SoCal lighting enthusiasts, and quickly realized, hey, there's a lot of people that are doing this. That is where I really started building, the community that we have today. And, fast forward to now, where I quit my job, where I was a tech executive for my entire career, basically in San Diego, to now where I'm, with Experience Lights full time. I always tell people, like, I didn't do this change for the money. Certainly not, because I'm making a whole lot less than I was back then. But I did it because of the relationships. And, Russell, you always say, these Christmas lighting events, it's not about the Christmas lights, it's about the Christmas lighting people. And it's so true. I do this, and my perspective on everything from going to events to producing these new products is all about the relationships, literally 100%. And if that wasn't there, if I didn't have these such strong relationships, it's not something that I would be doing. That is my primary motivator for everything in this hobby, is the relationships, and that's what I value so much. So from my perspective, I come from a background of startups, startup technology companies in San Diego. And I come from the standpoint of, it's a product development / user experience methodology of, don't make me think. There was a comment in the chat earlier today. It's like, oh, the newbies, they don't know how easy they have it. Well, that's really kind of where things are going, because it is the Amazon mentality of, I want it now and I want it easy and I want it to work. I always tell people that there's 2 primary customers of Experience Lights. There's the newbie and there's the commercial customer. And the person in between, I say, if you're soldering wires, it's not really the target customer. For Experience Lights, we really target easy. We want it to be easy, intuitive, and powerful. But people don't like this phrase, but it is something that I try to live by. Is and it's something I didn't invent it. Elon Musk says it too. It's not about adding features, it's actually about removing features, and it's how can you make it so straightforward and simple. I fail at that all the time. It's always an improvement. So it's something that I think really drives, from an innovation standpoint, Experience Lights to create products that are easier to use, more accessible, and goes more towards the methodology of don't make me think. So that is my perspective.
Very good. All right. So everything we talk about from now on is going to be, kind of forward-looking, future-facing. I think that was important to get everybody's background and kind of understand, where we're coming from today as we talk through these things. What I want to do now is ask each of you a specific question about your area of expertise, and kind of where it's going to be in the future. If you'd give a few minutes to respond to that, and then if any of the other panelists have a follow-up they'd like to, I'd love to hear your feedback on that response. Throw up your hand or speak up, and we'll listen to your reply. So Clyde, we'll give you the first one. Sequencing has changed so much in the last few years. I look back at my first house and the sequencing was terrible. But now you have so much detail, and the number of props keep growing. The number of prop vendors keep growing. There's a prop vendor on every corner that's kind of hard to keep up with, a sequence vendor on every corner. So I think the game keeps changing. So looking forward from a sequencer's point of view, and from, as someone who develops sequences and someone who provides sequences, what do you see the future in the next 3 to 5 years? What's going to be that trend in sequencing?
So to be honest, just in some random polling that we've done in our groups, and just talking to people, and knowing the number of people that we've had buy sequences or just join the club or whatever, I would say that probably one of the most surprising things that out of everybody who buys sequences, that would probably be about 80% of the community. And I don't want to say buy sequences. They also map other sequences. They share sequences, or they go to get them from the Google Drive, for example. But I think as far as sequencing goes, it's a very time-intensive investment that you make. And so when you look at the way that people try to hurry up and get their show going, when you look at the way that people plan out their lives and try to enjoy life, people are still going to opt to have sequencing done for them most likely more than doing it on their own. But that doesn't mean that people who want to sequence on their own won't do it. For example, a number of people, they'll pick up sequences, but then you'll see that they work their rear end off and spend 50, 60, 70, 80, 110 hours on a sequence that they did themselves. And the thing is that the more that somebody invests the time into the software, the more that they learn. There's so many choices just to pick from. So, and another example is the most recent release of X-Lights that came out 2 or 3 days ago. One of the newer developers, younger developers, I guess, or who hasn't committed a lot of code that I can noticeably know. He added something so incredible that really changed one effect that really makes a huge difference. And it's things like that happen that change it for me, and but also change it for the people who are using it, because now it's another option. If you have an effect that does one thing, and then over every year you add 3 more things onto that effect, in 10 years, you've got 30 things 30, 35, 40 things that effect can do that it never used to be able to do. So to really hone in on the skill to do it, that I think that the trend is going to always be, it's very complicated to sequence, but it's also very rewarding to sequence. So I don't know if that kind of covers the extent of the question, but
Well, yeah, I'm really looking for, from your standpoint, what changes. So you think that less in the next 3 to 5 years, less people will sequence for themselves, but it'll continue to be laborious and something.
It all depends. It all depends on how much they commit to figuring it out. That's what I think. I think more and more that people, I can tell you, when we started this hobby with X-Lights, there were no sequence stores. I mean, Lilia did open one, Ron opened his, we opened ours, Michael opened his. And I want to say Tom opened his after that. I think that was the history of events, we'll say. And every one of us had our own way to think about it. And because sequencing is an art, it's something I never, 8 years ago, I never sat there and said I'm an artist. Now I'm an artist, but I don't think about it that way. And so when somebody sits there and says, I got to sequence this song, they're not thinking about being an artist. They're thinking about sequencing a song. You know what I mean? So I don't think that people are going to not sequence their own stuff. I think they're going to continue to look for ways that they get to reclaim their own time, because it is a laborious process to sequence, especially to do it very, very detailed.
What do you think is going to happen? So AI is a huge buzzword now, with everything. So what do you think, if any, is AI going to play with sequencing, and what role?
So AI is a tool, and I mean, it all depends on how you use a tool, what extent it can be used. So we're working with another company. They're called Easy RGB, and they are developing the technology to make mapping sequences into any layout. Doesn't matter whose props you have. It doesn't matter what options you have in your layout. You upload your layout and you upload your network file, and it will take a sequence and it will whiz bang map it in there for you. And with their technology in doing that, I don't know that it's full 100% AI, but I mean, it does a heck of a job to take a sequence or to take a song and apply the effects that somebody sequenced to them. Now, whether that's my sequence or whether that's somebody else's sequence, to be able to upload it and have it do the work for it, that's one of the biggest hurdles that the hobby constantly faces is how do I map my sequence? I mean, I could do an intensive class. We did an intensive class in Florida on mapping sequences, and you could go through that whole list of things that we talked about for 8-9 hours, and that's still a challenge for people. So having the ability to just go sit on your phone, click a couple buttons and say, I want this song, and this song, send it to me. And they put their phone down and they go keep pushing pixels. And next thing they know, they get an email saying, oh, here's your sequences. They're ready for you to put in your show. That, I think, is going to be something that is going to make everybody's lives way easier and reclaim their time for them.
Very good.
So looks like Chad has a question.
Yeah, well, we're going to do the audience participation here in a little bit. So we're going to let everybody respond from the audience. But while I've got the panel here, so Keith or Tom, do y'all have any, where do you see sequencing going in the next 3 to 5 years? What's your vantage point? Because y'all all have, similar places, but what do you think is going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years with sequencing?
If you don't mind me speaking, like I think, I agree with what Clyde says. I think, in all honesty, when it comes to sequences, people are going to do whatever they have most fun in this hobby, and that's what they're going to continue to do. I mean, really, none of us do anything 100% all our own. Some of us think we do, but when you think about it, we're requiring on hardware we did not create. I mean, no one's making their own pixel, literally making their own pixel, making their own software from scratch, right? Like really, we're all relying on each other. I think what's going to happen is AI will take off, and for the people who are probably watching right now, they're going to probably continue to do things exactly how they are. But for people outside of this room, people are going to be buying completely pre-made shows, or have a show that's live that will actually use a form of AI to generate that show on the spot. But at the end of the day, I mean, even the people in this room, as the effects get better and AI is integrated directly into software that we use, we'll be supervising the effects. I mean, when you think about it, when some of us got into original light programming, it was really, we were controlling one light at a time, on, off, and a dimming function anywhere in between, or maybe just on and off, right? And now we have effects that we can literally drop onto a group of lights and it'll automatically do that. And we're just kind of supervising parameters, right? And I think the same thing's going to happen with AI, where we're just supervising parameters that we enjoy. The things we don't enjoy, we'll let either AI or hardware or software created by other people do. But the things that we find fun, we're going to continue to do, because I think that's why most of us do this.
It's good feedback. Keith, do you have anything you want to add?
So I violently agree with Tom. This is a hobby. People do what they enjoy and outsource everything that they don't. So, you know, that's what it should be. That's what a hobby's about. Hobby's not about sort of enduring an enormous amount of pain. So I do expect that people will continue to choose to do the things they like. And I don't think many people enjoy doing sequencing. The AI front, I think, is interesting, having spent the last year getting very deep into a whole bunch of AI. There's a lot of wishful or magical thinking that goes on around AI. There are definitely things that AI will be able to do. And, you know, sequencing, to be honest, is one of the things which I have some ideas about exactly how I would go about making it possible. And it doesn't involve using things the way they are today. It would change things up dramatically. But it's never going to be the same as an artist, right? It's, you know, you are never going to get sequencing that looks the same as someone that custom does it, just the same as, you know, buying a shirt from JCPenney is not going to get look as good as something that you buy from a tailor.
It's a great point. That's a great point. So, all right, good deal. So, Tom, for you, I think you have, like we talked about earlier in your intro, you have a really unique position in this hobby where you're a content creator, you're a sequencer, you create commercial shows. And I think to what you alluded to earlier, you even, you know, will sell package shows. I know recently you've entered into the pixel market and been selling moving heads for a while. So, with all those things, that vantage point is pretty unique. So what do you see coming in the next 3 to 5 years? And I think you've said a little bit of it, but what innovations are coming from your point of view?
I think within this group, we're going to continue to increase everything we're doing, right? I think stage lights will continue to increase, like the moving heads and sort of technologies and similar technologies, as it becomes easier because of people like Keith, who are making the software so easy to integrate other technologies via directly through X lights or through external things like through timecode. I think video walls will also increase. Like right now, when we first started, we just put lights up, and then lights came closer together. Then we started using P10s, and then we started using P5s, and now, like, you know, you can get a video wall that's like a P1, right? That's just way easier, and it just magnetically pops together, right? So I think that's going to increase for some of the people inside of this room. I think, again, like I was saying earlier, you're going to see more light shows, and unfortunately, you're going to be competing with these light shows that you'll find in Home Depot and Lowe's or Amazon, and some of them might actually be quite amazing, which might even be discouraging, right? But so it goes back to, like, you know, what do you enjoy? How do you enjoy this sort of thing? I think, again, like as technology improves, we're just going to become more, like I said, like more of a supervisor role. I think I saw a comment changing what do-it-yourself has changed quite a bit in the past 25 years, and I strongly agree with that. Because nothing really is, you know, truly do-it-yourself at this point. So I think people are just going to continue to focus on what makes impact. And I think going along to what Keith was saying, and also Clyde, it's just like that artistic side, that custom that side, right? It's going to be very hard for technologists to do that. So for all of us who enjoy, I think everything that we do that makes it unique is going to really stand out. And also possibly on the same level as interactivity is going to become more common, easier to pull off, and therefore expected. One of the things that scares me, even as I am a father and I'm raising my son, you know, into a world, and like, you know, and I think a lot of generations felt like, man, the next generation's screwed, you know. I mean, I think we all kind of have that you know, that sense, you know, and everything ends up turning out fine, right? But the world that we live in, I think, is going to be so much technology. It kind of scares me to the point that I think augmented reality is going to become bigger and bigger. And I think that's the part that concerns me. Like, are people going to really even go outside that much? Now, obviously, you know, with complete virtual reality, you know, you don't even need to go outside, which that does scare me. And I hope we don't ever enter a world like that. But with augmented reality, I think you're going to walk around, you're going to be wearing, you know, glasses or built-in contact lens, or maybe some other technology that's not even shown yet, where just as you see everything around you, things are going to interact with you, engage with you. And I think that's going to increase too. I think before you know it, people like, as I know Apple and other companies have been, making glasses and type of gear that you can wear either in virtual or in augmented reality. I think people are going to walk around and they're going to interact even on a personal level to wherever they are, right? I think also there will be more devices that can actually automate it. I know there was a projection mapping company. I forgot what it was called, but it actually already went under. I think probably because projectors weren't really bright enough with ambient light, or the amount of money it would cost to make a projector. Like unless you're Disney and you're stacking 7 barcodes on top of each other, right, to get a really, really powerful light, it's kind of hard. I think lasers may become more common, especially as lasers can be more controlled and software can be automated. If I put a laser in front of my house and software that can automatically, map it out to the house, and it's a laser that's been designed so it scans in a way that it doesn't harm people, built out of the box without requiring a laser variance. I think that can become more popular too, or maybe just various technologies where you don't have to set up anything physically, just one device you set up in front of a building, either through projection, laser, or other type of lights, or again, something that happens in the virtual world as well, or the augmented world. To me, that sounds a little bit less fun. I'm even depressed saying that, but I think as artists, and as people in this industry, we can either fight technology and say, no, we're never going to adapt it, or we can be part of the technology and embrace it and say, like, oh, how can we take these tools? How can we take these and instead of fighting them, but work alongside them, so we still have that artistic side, that personal side, but we're doing stuff that saves time and ideally improves impact in our community and for those watching as well. And I'm trying to think. I think that's pretty good for now, unless you guys have any questions about that.
Yeah, one thing you said really resonated with me, and I see it too, is the pixels do continue to get closer and closer together, as spacing, and then we went to density, then we went to video walls, and then you mentioned projection, which is, the ultimate in resolution. Do we get to a point where light shows start to get obsoleted with, projection mapping and things like that?
I don't think light shows are obsolete, because the one thing that is actually carrying this through and will evolve slowly over the years is a sense of tradition. A lot of us, and I think even though I'm known for, going outside of the box, I'm kind of a traditionalist in the sense that what makes it fun for me is that it was a light bulb. And when I was younger, this is still associated in my brain as an evolution of a Christmas light bulb, right? It doesn't even look the same anymore, right? But I went around and I saw C9, C7s and similar, bulbs. And I'm like, wow, it's a Christmas light, right? And slowly over time, it's evolved into what the pixel technology that we're using now. And our kids, like right now, my son Titus, he's 3. When he sees this light show, when he's older, he's going to look back at this technology as being like, man, remember the good old days when it was, pixels? Remember the good old days where it was, video walls instead of holographics or whatever, right? Like, it's whatever we have and whatever we grew up with will eventually become like the memories and eventually become tradition, right? So I think what's happening right now with projection, I don't think projection has that traditional side, so it doesn't have that reminiscing sort of thing, right? A lot of it for us who are older, we remember it because of what it was, how it has evolved, and that's what kind of creates the memories. It reminds us of times that we spent with our parents, our grandparents, when we used to go Christmas light watching or similar things, right? As technology slowly evolves, I think that tradition, those memories will play a significant factor in it. So right now with lights, I don't think that's going to go away, because we are still associating lights as a singular point that resonates inside of our brain as a memory and as something associated with Christmas lights versus Christmas projection or other various technologies. Eventually, all technologies will be reminiscent or be traditional in someone else's eyes or from someone else's perspective.
Don't you think, though, Tom, that projection mapping at the end of the day is somewhat fundamentally different, and it's really a case of, people are making choices. It's a different artistic expression, and you'll get those shows that have crossovers and they'll incorporate both, but you'll have people who will choose to go down one thing. It's just like, people choose to play one sort of sport or another, right? It's a choice.
100% agree.
Yeah, I feel like Keith kind of cut right in there, and he's right on the money. I can't help but think also that when we go to some of these commercial events, And a lot of the people that we see, that we shake hands with, that we're trying to work with in order to build things for them, they're traditionalists in the sense that all they ever use is a C9 bulb, and that's what they put on their house, and that's what they put on their customers' houses. So we're looking at the niche of our digital hobby versus the niche of just general putting lights on a house, and that's still something that a significant number of independent people, the general contractor at the end of the season, oh, we hang Christmas lights, and that's its own little cottage industry in itself. And I think that what we'll see, that's another thing we're going to see over the years, is we're going to see the beginning of the merging of someone like you, Tom, like you just said. You see your son gonna look back and say, oh, well, you used to do it this way, but now we're going to take this and do the same thing, and we're going to install it. We're going to take it down for them, and this is going to be the whole product for them, as opposed to, oh, now it's just a C9. Now they're pre-installed shows, or they're pre-installed, or they're installed specifically or created specifically, and then they come down at the end of the season, and the homeowner doesn't have to worry about. They don't worry about sequencing. They don't worry about any kind of that that investment in time, and knowledge, that trying to figure out how it all works. So seeing the progression of, just like Tom said here, the traditionalists are going to start changing and evolving into doing stuff that we're already doing, and I think that that's going to play a huge part going forward too.
Yeah, I think I agree. Absolutely. Thank you, Clyde, and thank you, Keith. With light itself, the reason why I don't think it's going to be replaced, it's just, yeah, like Keith said, it's a matter of choice. Light is unique because what light is in itself. I mean, we still know only so much about what light itself, and I'm someone who believes in a man upstairs who created us all. But with light versus projection, other technologies, I think light's very fascinating, because light is really something that's reflecting off particulate matter in the air to give us, a certain appearance of the waves in the air, whereas projection is actually light on top of a surface, like a hard surface, and how we interact with that. So light itself, I think, it's always been more brighter, and for me, it's always been a little bit more magical. And I do love how projection and light can be embraced with each other. I think we still have a little bit of ways to go for projection to catch up with the brightness level. One of the things I think that happens a lot online is people. Oh, did my connection die?
We can hear you. Your video.
Yeah,
you can hear me. Video pause. Okay.
Froze.
Yeah. I actually am. That's exactly how I look right now. I'm just lip syncing right now at this point. So I think what. Sorry, I lost my train of thought with that. But with light itself, it's just so powerful, right? When you look at light itself, it's blinding in a fantastic way, where projection doesn't have that same sort of effect, right? It almost feels ethereal or spiritual or out of this world when you look into a light that's really, really powerful. I never get the same sensation through other technologies. And for me, I think of the very first line of the Bible, in the beginning, God created light, right? Not the first line, but you know what I'm getting at, right? It's the very, very, very first thing. And I think because there's so many things emanates from that, and how the beauty of directly of light itself versus what light reflects off. And I think there's so much beauty in that. Sorry for the extreme philosophical connotation or perspective.
It's a philosophical conversation. All right, moving on. Let's go and talk to Jackie a little bit. And I got real nostalgic today in the Boscoia tour, because he was, showing us around the shop, and made me reminisce. My first Snowflake had 48 nodes, maybe one or two submodels, if any, arms and tips or whatever. And we used to have to go online and beg each other for models. And since then, it's progressed so much. You've got stuff that has even counts in it. You've got the wiring diagrams. I mean, to the point where I saw somebody asking recently, how do I wire this thing? There's not a Sharpie on the back that tells me where to put it. And because that's become commonplace, and I think it's a great iteration that we've seen even recently, where you've got wiring diagrams on the back, you've got very dense props. You've got, even breaks, you've got brilliant submodels. That's a lot of growth, right? So coming just from a few years ago with a very small low node flake to having some big, 750 node spinner or 1300 node spinner with pre-printed diagrams, and like your new trees, for instance, you can turn it into a Star Wars character, snowman, anything with a click of a button. So what's next? What's next in props? What's next in Coro? How you can continue that iteration forward?
Well, I mean, looking back, right, props were designed a lot different back then because, lights were different. When you got your pixels, you got them on rolls, and people weren't scared of doing the, splicing, and they weren't scared of creating their own models and doing these sort of things. It was truly a lot more DIY involved. So moving forward, when I got into it, one of the things that I tried to do was jump ahead and say, you know what, as many things as I'm going to do, it's going to be even counts. It's going to have submodels. These are all things that I consider to be value add, right? Not that that was the only thing that you could do. You still wanted, the different people who got those to kind of bring them further and add more and more to it. And you listen to your customers as well and see what they want, right? And you kind of move that direction. I think most all businesses are going to move to the direction of what people are saying. So, you kind of build off of that. The other thing about it is what's next with the other people, right? So let's say that a new and improved, X Lights comes out and it has a lot more different features in it, and that's every other week right now, there's new features coming out. Well, what can I build with that? What can I do with that? That's what I look at, because I don't want to stay in the past of how it used to be done. I want to make sure that I am kind of pushing the edge, and then in some cases help make that edge. That's what I like to do, is get in there with some of the developers and work with them and give them some ideas. Now, I don't know my head from the hologram when it comes to writing the codes. There's no way. I have to rely on the brilliance of those guys. But when they do complete this stuff, it's pretty amazing knowing that you can kind of build new things, right? Just recently adding new phonemes, to it, created the ability to add so many different types of props instead of stacking faces so that you have multiple phonemes. Now you can do that with all one thing. So now new stuff will come out around that. The states, the different submodels, the ability to add things and do that. That's all going to guide new stuff. But truthfully, it's all going to come down to what someone else comes up with as well, right? I may come up with something new, like the wings. When I came out with the wings were one of those things that kind of sparked a little bit more around it. You had a lot of electronics that came out. You had more and more people coming out with other type of selfie stuff. So it could be one little thing that comes out that actually helps, I want to say, make an evolution of new things. There's going to be new mediums. There's going to be a lot more different types of stuff. Coro's not the only game in town. There's other things to deal with, and sometimes that might revolve around what type of lights are out there available, because pixels might not be the best item for some things. So it really depends on what goes on, and with all these people that are in this panel, right? You look at what they come out with, what they do, and you'll kind of build off of that as well. I think what's good about these people here is that each one of us talk. So we can kind of bounce ideas around from each other and build off of that. Keith might tell me it's stupid, whatever. I might have to talk to Scott, and Scott tells me it's stupid, and then I'll give up on it for a little while. But then again, I might creep it back in for a little bit, but we'll figure it out. It's always something that's going to build on it. And I think having a great community like what we do, the ability to talk back and forth is actually going to be a big key to help us grow. One of the things that I want to see is more off effect. With what the other guys were talking about with the new stuff, like more lights and more this and more that, it's going to get overwhelming. And I think that just, for these other guys, I hope they realize that, especially anybody listening, off is a good thing to have so that you can focus around your show a little better.
So one follow-up question, I guess specifically talking about the future, do you believe in the next in 5 years, are we still going to be punching 12 millimeter holes into 10 millimeter Coro, or is it going to be, something else? Is it going to be, a seed's going to take over? Is it a different material that's going to take over? Are we still going to be, like I said, punching holes in Coro in 5 years?
Well, it really depends, right? Coro is cheap in comparison to a lot of other items. So when you get other items out there and you try and develop something for Siege, or you're trying to develop something for a different shaped pixel or whatever, that may work great. But then you still have all the tried and true stuff that's already out there. It has its, I guess, your ability to get it cheaper than some of the other products. So getting rid of those things might happen, but I don't see it happening anytime soon because of that factor. You've got a lot of people that's been in this hobby for a long time, and you go back to the days when most people would solder everything that they needed. They knew how to go in and deal with the channels and X lights, and they knew how to do all this stuff. It was definitely a lot more DIY. What we're moving to now is catering more to people who don't have that time, who don't want to stick to X lights year round and make it their life. They want the people who start in September putting their show up, and they don't even look at anything until that time. So what we're as vendors are going to be doing is something that Tom alluded to earlier, was doing more plug and play. Right, we're going to be looking at more stuff that when you buy it, it's a kit ready to run. All you got to do is put it together, some assembly required type thing. And what that material might be, I won't say it just depends on budget. It depends on the person who's wanting it. I think different things will be out there for different people, but I think the DIYers will still stick around and use Coro, and they'll want to change it out every 5 or 6 years and get something new.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and move on to the next one. Keith told me when I was, when I went and asked him, he's like, and showed him my notes. He said, "There's no way you're gonna make it through the first topics in even an hour," and he was right. So that's why we added the second hour. So appreciate your advice, Keith. But so Keith, I got a question for you. Like I said, I've been here since 2016, and the iterations of software has been incredible. X-Light has grown so much, and it's gotten so much more powerful, so much more intuitive. I mean, to watch y'all push effortless, hundreds of thousands of pixels effortlessly is pretty amazing. And so just to see, like I said, those iterative changes across, really the last, 8 years has just been phenomenal. And I tell people this, I say, I support multi-million-dollar commercial software that doesn't have nearly the amount of updates and feature sets and that constant development that X-Lights does. And so given the fact that y'all are a very nimble development team, the fact that y'all know the software so well and so intimately across the board, what do you think we're going to see as far as feature sets, new technology, in the next 3 to 5 years? I mean, way forward looking, not necessarily what's, down the road by Christmas, but forward looking, what's in the future?
So I think, look, first of all, I mean, fundamentally, we'll continue to solve problems, right? We'll address the challenges and the opportunities as they emerge. And you've seen a lot of that over the last few years as, particularly ease of use features appear as people reflect on how hard it is to do things and the repetitive tasks that they used to do. If you went back to the 2014 version of X-Lights, you would do something and then you would do it again and again and again and again. And literally you'd be doing the same thing 100, 200, 300 times as you would build your show out. And X-Lights has spent a lot of time just taking that drudge work out, getting rid of all those repetitive tasks, getting rid of the error-prone tasks, and trying to make you more productive and make your life easier. That said, I do think that there are some real challenges that X-Lights has ahead of it. and opportunities as well. I mean, first of all, and most fundamentally, I want it to stay free, and I mean free as in beer. It's it should be software that as Sean and had in his original vision, he wanted something that was super easy to use, that was free to use, that people could create great light shows with, and I think that's really important. We appreciate the fact that some people choose to make donations to the project. It enables us to do a lot of what we do, but we don't expect it and don't require it. I think that the biggest challenge for X-Lights, it's a challenge for X-Lights today, and to be honest, it's almost increasingly a challenge, is one of complexity. X-Lights is a very decentralized project. We don't get together and decide what's going to go into X-Lights. Each individual developer, each individual contributor makes their own decisions around what they think they want to do. And yeah, there's a few guardrails around bringing things in, etc., but not a lot. And one of the downsides of that, and I've been as guilty of this as anybody, is just adding stuff to just add stuff. And sometimes that stuff is incredibly valuable and adds, reduces complexity or dramatically simplifies things, and there's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes that complexity addresses the user case of one person, and quite frankly, it probably wasn't justified, or if it was justified, it should have been hidden away and kept out of the face of the regular user, because they just don't need to deal with that complexity all the time. So that's definitely a big challenge that we're going to have to solve with, and it's a barrier to entry, right? One of the key reasons why people who approach X-Lights and think they want to use it and then walk away from it is just that learning curve, that complexity. It's horrible. I think the second thing that I'd love to see change over time is the user interface. I mean, the fact is the user interface for X-Lights was dated in 2014. It's dated now. The challenge with doing this, and the technology to do this has existed for a long time. It's just the amount of effort that would be involved in doing it versus the return that we will get. And the reality is you would, and many projects have failed to do this, right? They've gone and done a big rewrite, etc., and the project never ends. Through a process like that, you would almost certainly see features drop out. That would piss off a certain number of people. At that point, you'd see a certain fragmentation. There'd be the classic X-Lights people versus the new X-Lights people. So it would be a very big challenge to tackle, but at the same time, do we see ourselves in 2035 using X-Lights with the interface that it has today? That's hard to imagine, right? Not impossible to imagine, but hard to imagine. I think the effect suite itself is largely complete. I mean, I've been looking in and around the effects for a long time, and with things like the shader and the like, I don't think we're going to see massive changes in the effect suite. You're going to see the ongoing tweaking and adding of a new parameter to this and a new parameter to that, and a simplifying of this, etc. But there's not a huge number of new effects that well, if only we knew how to write it, that you could add in. As props change, and you've seen this year with things like updates to the moving head, there'll be things like that will respond. But I don't think that there's a new single strand effect or a new spirals effect or something like that on the horizon that will come in. I think models will continue to develop over time. We will continue to see greater flexibility when we introduce the visualizer. We ended up making a whole bunch of rules around, when the visualizer would work, when you'd be able to drag and drop. And over time, we've seen those rules relax as we've managed to build capabilities into the models to support various layouts. I mean, I think X-Lights is always going to be opinionated about how you wire things and the like to some degree, but I think it will become less opinionated over time and more able to deal with the weird and wonderful things that people do. I think from a hardware integration perspective, we're in a very good place. I mean, the fact that X-Lights talks to pretty much every major piece of hardware out there. Our model is relatively simple. We see new hardware vendors come along, and it's always been very easy to incorporate their hardware into X-Lights and make it work seamlessly. I do think we could do more in terms of validating and troubleshooting and validating. So many people, they struggle through the setup process and getting things working. I wish, and I don't know whether it should, but the whole FPP, X-Lights thing, etc., is still way more complex than it really needs to be. And so many people struggle with it. It would be good to see just the whole show player thing and X-Lights working more seamlessly and easily would be good as well. And of course, the other one is AI. And, I hinted at it earlier. I think there are opportunities for X-Lights to do AI. The challenge with AI is one of local versus remote. If we build the AI in locally, you download X-Lights, everything is good to go. Who knows how big X-Lights would be at that point, though? These AI models are pretty large. But if you plug X-Lights into remote services, then you have the challenge of, well, who's paying for that? Are you bringing your own key? Are we bringing it for you? How do you cover the cost of it? The remote Falcon thing is a classic example of this. There you have to go and register for a key, and then you have to enter that key into Xschedule or FPP to get it to work. We could definitely add AI-enabled features using these remote third services, but because they cost money, you'd probably have to bring your own key, and there's all that complexity. And then we're assuming that these things are all going to exist. The reality is we're in a bubble right now. There's a lot of AI services where, quite frankly, the investors are paying for you to get what you want. At some point, those investors are going to stop paying for what you want, and you're going to have to start to pay for that service. And at that point, the economics will change. A lot of vendors will disappear. And I don't know that we want to tie to a whole bunch of those vendors until we really start to see, who are the winners and losers here, etc. Because there is a lot of code that ends up being quite specific to those providers as well that we'd have to build in. So I think we will see AI come. It's just a question of when.
Yeah, that's great insight. So what do you think the chances are that X-Lights is going to be replatformed in the next 5 years? And by that, I mean, WX widgets, C++, all that.
Well, that's the UI thing. I mean, moving away from C++, I mean, C++, the reason why Vixen, well, one of the reasons why Vixen struggled other than community is performance. And C++ has got, second to none performance. Now, there are improved languages which offer a closer match between performance and robustness, things like Rust and the like. But again, there's a lot of work that would need to be done to rewrite it in that. For what return, right? People would see it as, well, for those of you who are old enough, there was a vendor out there called Lightshow Pro, right? Offered the bee's knees in sequencers. There was not, if you were doing pixels, there was not a better sequencer than LSP. They existed in the very early 2010s and the like. When I went to my first Mini, this was the software that was demoed. No one was demoing X-Lights. People were demoing LSP. It cost $300-400 a license. Wonderful, wonderful software. A bit buggy, a bit unstable at times, but people loved it. They went off to rewrite it. 5, 6, 7 years later, they released a sequencer. They were struggling. And the same thing would be with X-Lights. It would take a long, long time to write it all. And like I said, along the way, a whole bunch of stuff would get dropped out, and everyone would have that thing that they like, they rely on, they use, and you lose one of those things. I can't tell you which one it'd be, but you'd lose something. And you get frustrated, and like I said, that's when everything would start to split up, and the hobby would devolve at that point. So I think I don't know. I think we might see some of the modules, maybe some of the utilities we might move to a new user interface, but it's going to be a while before we see the whole thing rewritten, and it'll be a huge project.
Sure. Thank you. All right, good deal. I'm going to continue to move on so that we can get to the audience feedback, because I know that y'all are wanting to ask your questions. So Miner, as a pixel vendor, like we're so accustomed to, like I asked Jackie earlier, the bullet pixels is what we see everything. And now you're seeing more trends come out, and I think it is just a trend with seeds and pebbles and the Evo form factor, and now you're coming out with the gumdrops or whatever the appropriate name is for those. I know Tom's got a version of them. You've got a version of them. You know, the smaller form factor pixels are same, you know, narrow, or I guess not as deep. Anyway, so what do you think is going to happen in the future from, you know, form factor standpoint, a reliability standpoint, a cost standpoint, and what are the trends we're going to see? We've talked about moving ahead some. You know, I've seen fountains starting to take off, and that might get more commercial as far as the water fountains and all that. But can you speak to what the next 3 to 5 years holds with pixels, with lights, with props?
Well, I think a lot of the guys previous to me spoke about it. It's more plug and play. The hobby's changing from, hey, I know how to do this, check it out. You know, back when you guys started, hey, this is how you do it. You're walking people through the process. Back then it was DIY, do it yourself. Now it's YDI, you do it. And that's basically the way I see it. You do it for me. So it's the same letters. It's just reverse. You do it for me. So people are looking for something simpler, something easier to do. Bullet pixels were great for what they were. But they're difficult to work with. When you're pushing them into Coral, you know, if you're getting some of the cheaper pixels, you're going to get those vampire, we call them the vampires, and you push it with your fingers, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, my thumb. That's, you know, that extra epoxy. So it's just a challenge. And so the idea is coming up with products that make it simpler to do. The seed pixels, like you mentioned, were the first iteration. Like, hey, this is simple. We just string them up, call it a day, and that's it. Some people didn't like the form factor, so they were like, well, we want a simpler form factor, but we want the simplicity. Well, that's where you get the evils. That's where you get the gumdrops. That's where you get the Tom Betgeorge iterations. I forget the names, but you know, they're all different iterations of them. We're looking to make it simpler for people. So I believe that that's what we're looking for in the next 3 or 5 years is simplicity. And for me, I'm pushing for a non-splicing pixel where you don't splice the wire anymore. You know, a lot of people don't know how to splice. I think I forget who mentioned that. The people that are coming into the hobby now are not wanting to splice pixels. They're like, hey, I don't want to splice a pixel. Well, as a vendor, it's replace a whole strand. We do it, but replacing a whole strand for one bad pixel is not cost effective at all. So I think the next step and in the future, in the next 3 to 5 years, is having a non-splicing pixel where you replace a pixel without having to splice it, and making it simpler. And if technology, again, this is all jokes aside, if technology gets really high tech, you know, some people were talking about where the props are made of the pixels already, where you don't have to do anything. It's already made for you, and somebody just sequences it. Or again, as Clyde mentioned, 80% of people are buying the sequences. It's already going to be made for you. It's just plug and play. It's just going there. It's going to be so much easier for anybody to jump in. The way that I design products is if the grandparents can do it, then I designed it properly. You know, Experience Lights, David is going to jump on here and he's going to mention something similar. It's a great mindset to have. If your grandparents could do it, then you designed it properly, and that's the way you should go. If it's too complicated, then I don't believe that the new generation of people are going to want to do it. You know, I joke around and say, you know, what's a pixel? But you know, it really is the image. It's literally the smallest point of an image, which means it's the most important part of the show. You can have the software, of course, you can have the software that works. But if you don't have the lights that work, your show, you're not going to have anything. Your sequence is amazing, but unless you have the pixels that work, that are going to follow the technology, then you know we're going to be stuck. I mean, an example of like the GS8208, you know, some people are like, oh, you don't need the double datas. You know, it's not important, but it's one step closer to where we need to get for to make it more accessible for people. I do believe that we have to get to a point to make it really easy. You know, it's really easy for people to be able to use it. Right now, we are a niche. Clyde mentioned it. We still are a niche. There's still people that use traditional lights, and we have to accept that. I've seen drive-throughs where, you know, they use the traditional side, and you ask people at the end, hey, what, you know, what was the best part? They'll talk about the easiest, funniest thing. Hey, that snowman in the front, that blow up doll, that was the best. And they'll remember that. Pixels are great. They really are, but they should be only a part of your show. The best, I think the best one that I saw for example of what I'm talking about is Dave Castles. He said he had a techie in the front and tacky in the back, and that was all the traditional stuff. That's exactly a good combination of stuff that we need to do. I like embracing the original stuff. That's the reason I came out with the leg lamp, because it's a traditional take on the leg lamp, but now you can control it and sequence it. So you still get the traditional look, the Christmas story, but now you can sequence it into your show. So I think 3 to 5 years from now, based on what X Lights can do, again, what Keith just talked about, the technology is going to change. So we also have to change the technology that we have with bullet pixels. And I say bullet pixels, but I just mean pixels overall, because as you can see, we just have several different form factors that are coming through. I'm hoping that the Coral, we're talking about Coral as being the product. I'm hoping that there's different options, because I would love for a way to use the seed pixels without having to use poppers to go into the Coral. So then you can use that more sensibly and just be like, hey, I'm going to string it up and call it a day. I think the technology is going to be growing as fast as the other fields in our market change. So the sequencers have to change. The Coral people have to change. The X Lights, Lightorama, I have to say Lightorama too. So and WLED, they all have to change to support the changes that we can bring. Because there's a ton of brand new chipsets out there, Russell, that have a lot of cool features that we can pull in. But if the software doesn't support it, or the form factor isn't supported by the Coral vendors, it dies instantly. And plus you also have to talk about the expense, because when you're doing a different form factor, you have to consider like mold expenses. You have to buy the mold, you have to create the mold, and how long before somebody rips you off. So you have to take all that into consideration. So 3 to 5 years from now, I still see bullet pixels being a primary, but I do see several other form factors that are going to be mixed into it. And that's the cool thing about it. That they can be mixed in, and they'll give you different pops. Like somebody mentioned the Evil Pixels and the Gumdrops. They have a different look than what the bullet pixels do. So maybe the bullet pixels are going to be for your matrix because you want more defined lights. So you want a cleaner light, then you get those. The Evils and the Gumdrops are a little bit more diffused. So maybe you want those on your mega trees. You want those to give you a little bit more a diffused look when you're doing your permanent lighting. So every one of those has a place and where you're going to use them. I don't think they're going anywhere. As far as like moving heads, we started selling them about 2.5 years ago. And when we first started selling them, they were over $1,000. They're expensive, but as more people jumped in, we were able to get the pricing down. And now the price point is almost there. I still think the price point is really high, but I don't think we can drop the price point any further without sacrificing quality. If we drop the price point any further, we're just going to be sacrificing quality and service. And so I think the price point is exactly where it's going to be for the foreseeable seasons. But again, it could change. Maybe there's a technology that pops out in 3 years and we're like, oh my God, we got to jump on that. Tom talked about projection mapping. I agree with him to some extent. I do believe that it has definitely a market. It's easier to an extent to do it. But I also think that it can be combined. It should be combined with everything else. It has a place. I think Kyle does a really good job of putting projection mapping with his pixels, and then he has a show and fireworks. And I'm like, but you're not focused on just the projection mapping, which could be a movie. So it just gives you the opportunity to just have mixtures. And I do believe projection mapping, I won't say lasers because I'm terrified of people using lasers improperly. So I won't say lasers, but lasers, if done properly in commercial settings, are a great filler. I'm starting to see some residential people pushing lasers into their shows. I don't foresee, again, for liability purposes, I don't foresee any of the vendors pushing it to residential people, just because there's so many variances that you have to get. There's a variance to sell it. There's a variance to operate it. There's just so many things that you have to do to be able to do lasers, that I think there's going to be a foothold there before it becomes super popular. But it is really cool. I just don't see it in the next 3 or 5 years becoming that niche thing that is the next thing to go for our shows. Projection mapping is where I think it's going, Russell, for the next 3 or 5 years.
Okay, cool. Thanks. And one common thing I keep hearing is that interdependence in between, the prop vendors and the hardware vendors and the sequencers, and everybody's working together to kind of to see what is the future, and kind of depending on each other to see what direction is this going to get pushed. So David, controller, I started with Falcon, the V2 F16 V2. And since then, once again, I'm an old man now, so I'm like, I had to configure it with Excel and this and that. So you've seen, and Keith talked about it too, that that relationship that X-Lights has with the hardware layer and how that's gotten so much easier. I think yourself has pushed a lot of feature sets to the controllers that have been innovative. And Keith's worked with Falcon. They've done a lot of innovative stuff and a lot of things to make the controllers safer and easier to use and better. So, like I said, not getting into trade secrets or anything like that, but what do you see the future of controllers being in the next 3 to 5 years? Where are we going to see that go?
Before I answer that, I wanted to know, Minor, is it a seed or is it a pebble? No, I'm sorry.
I've done that path.
Sorry. Okay. So, real quick, looking towards the future is always fun, because a lot of times we get in the trap of saying, thinking in the mindset of what's possible today, and you kind of have to break that mindset, or try to anyways, even though it's difficult, and say like, well, what is going to be the future, even though it sounds weird. And some of the stuff, as we talk about hardware, there's a lot of steps that you have to take to get to an ultimate destination, and in that involves a lot of failure and steps along the way. But I think there's so much. I always think about this, and it sounds so far-fetched, but I still think for drive-throughs, for instance, self-driving cars. And the cars are going to be driving through automatically. The show system takes over, and that show is entirely personalized to you. And as you go through it, it's things that you like, and it's maybe lights up there, it's proposing to your girlfriend or whatnot. You have this unique drive-through experience, kind of like maybe like a car wash in a way, but there's the whole self-driving car thing is going to be much more common in the future, certainly. So that's a fun thing. Tom touched on AR. I think that is also going to be huge. I totally agree that people are going to be. I hope people still go out. Not stay in their houses, but AR is going to be huge. I think that's going to be great. But as we talk about like the residential side of things, we also have to remember we're in the TikTok generation, and the doom scrolling, and people have attention spans in the order of seconds. And so as such, that's going to affect the light shows and where things go from that standpoint, right? Is how do you keep people interested? And I always tell people, when I'm sequencing a song, a song is 3 minutes, and it's like, oh gosh, this is so long and it's so repetitive. And you say the chorus, so I usually trim it down to 45 seconds to a minute, because the songs are so long and people don't have attention spans. That's all to say, you have to continually think about what is going to keep people engaged and interested. And really, it's been touched on. I think that it's going to be the interactivity side of it, and that's really kind of where things are going. It's a huge thing. We launched the Light Animator Pro this year, where people, it's a touch screen where people can interact with the lights. You looked at, and so that's on the side of the person coming to the show, right? Keeping them engaged and keeping them interested and not bored. And then on the side of the people deploying the light show, the consumer or the person building the show, you know, they also don't want to spend any time doing anything. You know, you look at the success of like the star shower, right, at Home Depot. That was successful because people could go out and deploy this in their yard in 10 seconds, and it littered their front yard with lasers. And again, looking forward to what's coming in the future. And again, this is something that Tom, that George touched on as well, is whatever's going to be fast and easy and have the most impact is what the consumer is ultimately going to want to put on their house from a decorating standpoint. There's a big difference between the hobby as we know it, the X-Lights official group, and the general consumer that goes to Home Depot. The trend, you know, but we're seeing, you know, and Minor touched on this, my customers, his customers, Tom, Bet George's customer, it's the you do it for me. They're in our X-Lights groups, but they don't want to learn. And, you know, we talk about, well, they're missing out on such important information. Yes, Bill Porter, they are. But at the end of the day, that's where it's all shifting to. It's because people don't have attention spans, the people that are watching it and the people that are putting out the shows. And they just need it to be easy, 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 easy. So every show, you know, when we look forward to the hardware, it's about what is going to be easy to deploy for the user and what is going to be something that is going to keep the viewer engaged. And what we, I'm gonna turn off my background here for a sec. And it's all about, necessity breeds innovation. And there's been so many products that have been developed because I needed it. Pixel 2 Things was one of them. The input extender was another one. The panels controller was another. Here's another one that I just made, again, for me. This is a board that I made for testing purposes. It has 800 pixels on there. And what's really funny is when you guys were talking about, hey, what about props that have the, Delaney, don't show that. You're getting one in the mail, Pat, don't worry. When we talk about props that already have them installed, this has 800 pixels on it. These are all 2mm by 2mm RGB LEDs on here. And I'm using this just for testing. I have it mounted on my wall over here. It has, 5-volt power supply built in to power all the lights. You just plug it into AC. I can plug these into my outputs of my controller so that I can visualize what's going on without having strings of pixels all over my office for testing purposes. And it also can act as a differential receiver. It can be one string of 100 or 8 strings of 100 or one string of 800, depending on how you want to configure it. I say all of that because I used this just for me, for fun, for testing purposes. The more I showed people, they're like, oh, I want one, I want one, I want one. Well, James Van Hort, I need one, see? And so this is kind of how a lot of these products start, is just things that I need. I build them for me, and then people think they're cool, and then I figure out how we can productize them. Patent pending, yeah. Another big thing is traditional lights. Those are coming back with a vengeance. The pixels can only put off, they can only do so much. When we talk about nostalgia, I don't think that's ever going to go away. I think that the warm glow of Christmas is a feeling that can't really be reproduced with the pixel lights. So I do think the AC traditional lights are still going to play an important role, even 3-5 years, even into the future, or I hope so. I think so. Really, the summary of it all is how can the hardware be deployed easily and with as little user error as possible, and you just continually improve and make it easier and simpler. And then what are you doing to keep the end user, the viewer, engaged and keep their attention? Those are the two things that I think are probably the most important from a hardware perspective moving forward.
Thanks. All right, I want to move into the audience portion of it. I know y'all have all had a lot of questions and been patient. So if you have a question for our panelists, and once again, I want to keep this future related. So if you have a question pertaining to the next 3 to 5 years, let us know. Throw up your hands or put it in chat, and that's something that I'll be glad to read through, or you can ask yourself. So one question is about future sequence lengths, and is it hard for younger audiences to keep that, I guess, 4-minute song, or are we going to see more of that TikTok kind of timing? So one of our sequencers, if you want to speak to that, or anybody.
So the challenge with shorter sequences is the audio, right? Because the audio you expect people to buy the audio as the audio, and the audio obviously comes as the artist originally released it. We did build into Xlite some time ago the ability to define a cut list, like an edit for a song, etc. In the hope, or actually, I built it in the hope that it would enable vendors to be able to produce custom versions of songs, cut down versions of songs, etc., where people could buy the original audio, run it through the edits, and get the audio file that they could then use with the sequence and not, violate copyright, etc. But it never took off. So I don't know whether it's just a lack of demand for that sort of thing, or they choose to distribute the audio in other ways and get proof of purchase for the audio in other ways.
There's a question in chat I think's pretty good, and I don't disagree with this. I don't know a way to solve it, but is there a way to make light show networking simpler? I think Keith talked a little bit about it, with the player aspect versus the controllers. But in general, is there a way to make having a show communicate? What do you think that's going to look like in 3 to 5 years? Because I do agree, if you sit in the Zoom room, a lot of questions revolve around show players, show networks, and how those interact. So what is going to change there, if anything, in the next 3 to 5 years?
I mean, there are definitely ways to do it. It usually involves providing as a product a more complete element, right? So at the moment, you bring your own router, you bring your own switch, you bring your own, etc., or people want to reuse their stuff or want to incorporate in their show network. If you become more opinionated about this, if you say, actually, no, you can't bring your own show router, you buy this product, it all comes together, all the bits, etc., and you just use it, you're fine, right? The reason why these props work well from Home Depot and the like, etc., is because you're buying the whole thing, right? As soon as they need to integrate together, they get more complicated, but they also come with a solution. They sell you a central control unit or central show player or whatever it happens to be. So can you solve it? Sure, absolutely. Do you have to give up some customization and configuration and ability to set it up the way you want? Yeah, you kind of do. But for a lot of the audience, that's a perfect trade-off. They're actually really happy with that, and they don't even mind spending more on it.
Mm-hmm. Does anybody else have an answer to where they see that interaction going in the future?
Yeah, I mean, just going back to the simplicity side of it, right? Ideally, the hope is that when a miner was talking about the grandma, which is funny because I used to work for a company called Linspire, and that was their tagline. It's like an operating system so easy your grandma could use it. And but unfortunately, that's where the hobby is going. And somebody mentioned, is this losing the art? Is this ruining or helping the hobby? I think all of this stuff helps the hobby. It doesn't hurt the hobby, because there's still going to be, your light show is going to be better than somebody that has something cookie cutter, 100%, because you put so much more time, effort, and heart into it, versus something that is copy and pasted and that you can see anywhere. But at the end of the day, for the networking side of things, is I don't want to think about the networking, just like I don't think about the Wi-Fi in my house. I just plug it in and it just works. It's got to be the same thing for the networking, where you get these devices, you plug it into your network switch or put it onto your Wi-Fi network, even though I hate Wi-Fi. And it just works. They all talk to each other, they see each other. There's not any additional steps. It's the Apple single button interaction.
So given the fact that Mo volts is Mo beta, where do you think that voltage is going in the future for pixels?
I don't think it's going to change much. I mean, I've seen people ask for 24 volt. But for pixels, I think 12 volt native is going to be what's going the trend. Right, we started off with 5 volt native, and that's where some of the traditionalists are 5 volt all the way. But then we got the 12 volt with the resistors and the capacitors. So we got the regulated and the resistors, but then now we're pushing for 24 volt. I don't see the necessity for 24 volt pixels right now. Maybe puck lights for sure, 24 volt, 48 volt. Those are the ones I'm starting to see a huge push for, because those are permanent lights. You want to go all the way down, cleaner cuts. You don't have to cut them. So you want to go further as far as you can with those. But with bullet pixels, I mean, with the bullet pixels we have now, you can go almost 400 or 500 pixels without any power injection. That's a substantial amount. I don't foresee needing to go to 24 volt or 48 volt. But the larger lights definitely, like you saw the 50, there's a 50 watt flood that people are asking for. Hey, do you have a large flood? So we definitely have to push the envelope there. But for pixels themselves, I don't foresee it going any further unless we're starting to push for like animatronics and stuff like that into our shows.
So we talk a lot about safety, with the pixel fires we had years ago, and every year, you see stuff creep up. I'm interested to see what can be done at both the controller level and, the hardware layer, the pixel layer, to make shows safer, and more intelligent, I think. Where do y'all see that going in the next 3 to 5 years? You're going to have bidirectional communication with things, or are you going to have feedback come to the controller? What are you going to have?
I just turned on my video, then I saw Keith did too. So Keith, you want to go?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, obviously, Dave and I are in a very similar business here in terms of the controllers. We're already got controllers that will turn off the power to the pixels when the data stops arriving from your show player. We've got receivers which will turn off the power going to your pixels if the receiver stops receiving data. We've got two-way communication between receivers and controllers, so it knows the state of the fuses, it can turn them on and can turn it off, etc. So yeah, I mean, that sort of stuff largely is already solved and exists. Right, and we've also got the external connectors, so you can then turn it, because you don't always drive all your power through your pixel ports. So, when you've got power injection boards, we've also got power injection boards, which have that same ability to have the controller turn all the fuses off and stop the power from injecting into your props as well.
David?
I would also say that I think the solution that, we've, been putting forward with the controller solutions, with the eFuses and such, is, potentially, and I say potentially because, it's a theory, is patching a problem that we had, right? Or continue to have, I suppose, which is the continued, race to the bottom in terms of pixel quality. Right. So, would we have needed or had the necessity for these protections if the quality of the pixels was what it was in 2012, 2013? My Raywu pixels that still function from back then.
Yeah, and you get a pair of pliers, you squeeze on those pixels, and you can't even put a dent in them, right? Whereas today, it just the fill falls apart like bloody cottage cheese. It's useless.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If I had a time machine, I would go back and buy every 2016, 2017 Raywu pixel that I've still run those in my show, and they're great. So anyway, sorry, that's not forward looking, but
no, I agree with what the guy said. It's they came up with a patch to the problem, and I think it was the race to the bottom where people wanted the cheapest possible pixel. And the reality is there's some vendors that stepped up and said, no, we're not going to have the cheapest possible pixel. We're going to change that. And I think that's where the different form factors came, Russell. You know, we have different form factors because I looked at the bullet pixels and I said, well, this is the cheapest possible way to make a LED bullet pixel. It's a cheap casing with some epoxy, aka glue. So just
Mike, are you okay?
and so it's just glue, and it's the cheapest possible way to make it. And so to change that, we have to change the form factor. But to change the form factor, we have to ask the prop makers to change their form factor, the way they cut. So it's a transition. If I come up with a form factor, like there's there's chipsets that require bigger PCB, but that chipset would be amazing. It has built-in stuff. So if it fails, it stops working. Like, hey, no more power, send it down, but the data still continues. There's different chipsets that allow us to do that, but we would have to change the form factor for the bullet pixels to get to that point. But it would all take a process. Will the controllers, like the Falcon controller, the Cope controller, the Genius controller, even the WLED controllers, will they support it? Will the Coral people say, well, you know, this is a 15mm bullet pixel. Are we going to cut Coral just for that pixel right there? So it's all goes hand in hand, that we can only push as far as we're allowed to, because if I invest this money on this mold and I can say, hey, this is going to have a 5-year warranty, and how many people are going to want it? How many people are going to be willing to pay for that? Because are they, you know, I think you guys said that pixels used to be 50 cents, $1 at some point. You know, but the quality was there. So are people going to be willing to pay that much for a pixel, 50 cents for a UL listed pixel that is guaranteed for 5 years? So, you know, I think the technology is there to be able to make them that way, but because everybody's pushing for the cheapest possible pixel most of the time, they're going to be like, no, I'm good, I don't want that. So we have to take that in consideration when we make changes to the pixels that we currently offer.
But minor, I mean, at the end of the day, it's not the form factor that's the problem here. It's the quality of the epoxy that's put in it. If we could go back to, and I don't know, maybe there were safety issues with the original epoxy, but if we go back to the original epoxy, to be honest, that would solve it for bullet pixels. As for the other things, sure, adding new protocols for new chips, as you know, the controllers can support those sorts of things. We already do support a number of them.
No, 100%. I think the epoxy was the biggest issue, 100%. When looking back at it, it was the epoxy, the cheap capacitors. So yeah, 100% agree with you. But again, it's always who wants the cheapest possible pixel. And I'm starting to see people say, I don't want the cheapest possible pixel, at least not everybody. And especially if we're as you know, we've all talked about the future. If we're trying to get into the point where it's all plug and play, we're going to have to see an increase in pricing a little bit to get to that quality where it would be possible for Home Depot to pick them up. You know, because it has to be a quality product in order for it to get to the masses. So it would be something that has to change drastically. And I do see people that want the quality, but there are also people that say, give me the cheapest possible pixel. I don't even care if it has a warranty, as long as it turns on, give me the pixel. But then they come back and say, hey, hold up, it didn't last the season, but you paid 15 cents for that pixel, but you're expecting the same quality that you would get at 30 cents.
I think a lot of that's going to go with the different types of customers, right? You have people who want this high quality stuff for their home, but you have other people who want lower quality but cheaper stuff for maybe their yard and maybe for drive-throughs. You know, they look for more bulk instead of having the high quality. High quality is great for stuff like, you know, permanent house lights and things like that. So, you know, pay more for that. You know, buy the high quality UL listed stuff, but then turn around and buy cheaper stuff when you want the bulk items out in your yard. That's kind of the way it should go there, in my opinion.
I think there's also one of the biggest dangers isn't actually the pixels themselves. I'm sorry. Well, pixels can be a big danger, but at the same time, we have a hobby of do-it-yourselfers who sometimes don't know enough of what they're doing, and they bypass important safety things that a lot of us are setting up. I mean, you have people running, you know, I've seen commercial sites run hundreds of feet of extension cords plugged into each other, right? So it was, I mean, no circuit, it wouldn't pull enough necessarily amperage to shut anything off. All it's going to do is cause a fire. I mean, I've seen people do power injection improperly, where if something gets cut loose, it bypasses all fuses, and again, you have a fire. I think at the end of the day, what's also kind of hard is, as much as we can do within software and hardware to mitigate it, we still have some people who will either not learn enough that's maybe required for safety and just kind of do things in a dangerous way. I've seen people every year add fire in a very dangerous way, lasers in a dangerous way, drones in a dangerous way, and they're trying to, they see this stuff, and yeah, I'm part of the blame.
Yeah.
You're sitting stuff. I'm sorry.
Removing the ground pin from their extension cables.
Oh yeah, and then I think mine just said, like, what's GFCI? Removing GFCI outlets where they need to be. So as long as we have people who are willing to do things unsafe, or like, hey, no, it's fine, right? And then before you know it, there's a bad fire. So far, to my knowledge, I don't think a bad fire has happened where anyone's been severely injured. But I mean, even I'm going to say something dumb, but even just the way that people get on 18-foot extension ladders in a way that's absolutely not healthy in a situation that absolutely calls for a lift. We're like, nah, I don't want to get a lift, right? And they fall off the ladder and, they injure themselves, badly. That actually has happened multiple times in our hobby. So I think I don't know if just enough emphasis within the groups and maybe through education, just to like, hey, if you're in this hobby, here's some really important things we want you to know, that even if you use our hardware, use these pixels, you can do things in a way that makes it very dangerous and no longer obviously fun or a blessing to the community.
Yeah, 110% agree with that. Just from the support side of things, we help people. Every year, somebody posts a picture of, a burned up controller, and they're like, this piece of crap, these connectors are bad. And every time, dude, it's a loose wire, it's a loose wire, it's a loose wire. And, but people do, they burn stuff up, hook up stuff backwards. I've seen that where every pixel, every pixel in this delivery is bad, and they're sitting there, wiring it up backwards. Their pigtails are wired wrong and all that. So you see a lot of that it's self-inflicted. And I do agree wholeheartedly with that, especially as that knowledge, as the barrier to entry decreases and the, less technical folks are that are jumping in, you are going to have that as kind of a byproduct, where stuff is done wrong. And even with technical people, I mean, I see a lot of smart people doing it too. So
we're in a transition between the times where you have the DIYers who know these type of things. They have the background, they have the electronics ability, the building ability, and we're slowly getting into that person who don't have that background, but they want to plug this stuff up, but they still have to figure it out. Maybe they're going to bypass some things because they just don't know the best practices. And that's where a lot of people do get in trouble. They don't really know. We're not quite there to the 100% plug and play yet, but that transition is going to be painful.
I agree. All right. What other questions do you have for the panel? We're almost out of time. So, oh yeah, this got asked earlier. Sorry. So, what's the future of 3D? 3D modeling and X lights, and what's the future of 3D, Keith?
And if I could add to that question, I have a tree in my front yard, a live tree, and my plan this year is to model this fully in 3D. So, Keith, how am I going to do that?
So I did a bunch of research. Unfortunately, advanced math is not my specialty. And I tried to convince Gil to get involved because Gil's math is way, way, way better than mine. But technically, it should be possible to have multiple images and 3D triangulate out where the pixels are in space. Scale you can't determine, but that's okay. You don't need scale. We can adjust scale later. I just couldn't work the math out. If someone could help me work the math out, I would be willing to build it.
So that's for doing the 3D models themselves, but is there anything, or maybe you're referring to
Oh,
effects
you mean
too?
as in 3D effects?
Yeah, like if you had a sphere and you wanted that sphere to grow out and shrink, a 3D sphere.
Yeah.
Submodels there all the way.
It's difficult, right? The effects in X-Lights are all inherently 2D. There is no 3D element to them. But then again, yeah, models used to be all 2D as well, and then we eventually managed to create 3D models. They're not necessarily the easiest things to work with when you're doing custom ones, but you can do it. So I won't say never. The problem is always with these things is, you know, there's no point writing an effect that only works on one model. It's not an effective use of time. And so you need an abstraction that works well. Now, could such a thing exist? I mean, technically not impossible. You would obviously need to come up with effects that would be interesting when applied in 3D. It just means that when we create the buffer and send it off for rendering, rather than just creating the usual 2D buffer, we'd have to define a 3D buffer, and then the effects would need to have that extra coordinate. So technically, I don't think it's enormously hard to do. It's just about the critical mass of demand to make it worth all the effort to do it. And someone sending me a 3D model that I can test it on. Hey, you need to redo that board in 3D, David.
What if someone just said pretty please?
Oh, that always works.
So this is a good question, chat, and I think we'll end on this. For each of you, what new age technology are you most excited about right now in general? So what new technology platform are you excited about, and then how can it be implemented in our hobby?
Well, just jumping off what Tom said with the AR and just going back to that, I do think there's so many opportunities for unique viewing experiences. I was not in on the virtual reality stuff until I got this Meta Quest, and been playing with that, and how it changes your world is pretty fantastic. So I think from the viewer's perspective, and even potentially from the show creators' perspective, in terms of how they can map things with more advanced tooling, I think is going to be pretty awesome. I don't know how far in the future that is, but that gets me really excited, because you'll be able to do a lot of really cool things.
Yeah, that would be cool to see, for AR to be able to, basically visualize your show as you're rendering stuff and mapping stuff and all that, and to actually take the perspective of what it would look like in the yard. That's an interesting concept.
I have a
Tom,
question
what
I'd like
about
to
you?
ask. Is that possible to ask you right now? I live on a corner, and I don't have a fence. And so one of the problems, the reason I went Wi-Fi is to cut down my wires. And as our shows become more interactive, there's going to be more and more people walking in your yards and things like that. So is there a way that somewhere down the line we can remove cables, between the controllers and the props, so we become we eliminate the possibility of people walking in your yards and ripping out all your controllers, because as more and more we become interactive, it's going to create more and more problems.
Something that's been discussed quite a bit, and I think that it kind of plays into what you're saying, Bruce, is as things get simpler and simpler, and maybe these props have the lights already embedded in them, they may also have a mini controller built into them, and each of these props just need to be plugged in, and they all kind of mesh together. Again, looking forward to the future. So I think that you're correct in that. I think there will be a reduction in wires for sure. Right now, everything is very modular and customizable, and lends itself to a lot of creativity. But as you make things easier, as you remove those wires, as you get these props that are pre-built, I think the number of those options are going to be reduced. So it's a give and take.
So Keith, you got your camera on. Did you have a new technology you're excited about?
Not really. I struggle with time to do my day job and my night job. I have been playing a lot with AI though, and not AI as a consumer, but AI as a developer, and it's been interesting to see some of the things that that you can do and some things that you can't do. And yeah, Dave, I will believe self-driving cars when I see them, and I reckon we're still 50 years away.
Hey,
So
you know,
Keith, with you working on AI, I had bounced this idea off you about a year or so ago, where somebody rolls up onto a display and through their smartphone, they send a message to a show address, and an AI avatar pops up and answers their question. Is that a possibility in your head yet? When I sent it to you last time, you went, not so much.
Well, look, it's possible, right? But again, right, a lot of these ideas come down to demand. You know, how much is it going to be useful? I don't know if David and the other guys can talk about it, right? But you know, there are so many things we could do, right? But there's only so much time in available, and so you've always got to look at something and say, realistically, just how much utility. Even if you ignore the commercial side of it in terms of return on the investment of people's time, you know, you've got to look at it and say, well, how many people are going to want to do that? How much utility does it offer versus the complexity of doing it? You know, if it's a very easy thing to do, sure, let's just do it. It's not a big deal. Right. But if it's going to take a lot of work to do and it's very, very narrow in its focus, etc., then, you know, it's just that's where hobbyists get involved. That's where people who really are invested in that really want to do it and will spend the time in it. But as a creator that's sort of doing things more generally for the hobby, I focus on the things that I can see lots of utility in and lots of people wanting to use. I've already written enough features that no one uses.
The times that I have mentioned it to civilians about, you know, being able to have their kid send a message to Santa Claus and Santa Claus replies back, the light in their eyes is like, oh, that'd be so cool.
Yeah, but it's not about them. It's about how many other hobbyists want to do that on their show, right? That's the critical mass that you need to get. And I'm not saying it's not there. I'm just saying it's getting to that point where it feels like, hey, yeah, that's a sensible investment of our time, right? And the technology's there as well, right? I mean, again, we have the problem with the whole, you know, the web technologies and you know, API keys and solving all of that sort of stuff. Not that it's technically hard to solve, it's just a bit painful.
I know D-ID already has an API that they're willing to talk to us about.
So Tom, what emerging technology are you most excited about, and what futures does it have in lighting?
Yeah, so yeah, I can't answer this question without blowing my cover. So I'm just gonna instead of talking about it in about 2 or 3 weeks, you'll see it.
All right, fair enough. Good teaser. Good teaser. Jackie, what about you, man? What new technology are you excited about?
You know, the new lights, the different types of lights, they're going to open up a lot of doors as far as material use and different things. Like I said, Coro is one of those things that will always be there, but I also believe that there's going to be some other mediums that will become more and more popular as we go. I mean, you already see it with different types of you know, HDPE and different things like that, but you know, more permanent structures will probably be one of the key things that we'll get into as far as on my end of it. So diversifying that direction, making something a little bit different other than just Coro props. I think the advancements of some of the controllers that are out there being able to stand alone a little better than they used to. I think those are going to open up a lot of doors for the average household buyer, you know, to be able to buy something and put out in their show, but it will never take away from the hobbyist who can actually sit there and make their props sing and dance and do the things that they want to do. So I think it's going to be fun watching what comes in the next few years.
So Miner, you see a lot of stuff, a lot of new demos and products and all that. What new technology are you excited about in general?
Laser drones. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Laser drones.
We already have the fireworks. We need some laser drones. and it stays in disguise. I don't know. Maybe that's what's coming up next. Maybe I guess right, Tom. And he has some laser drones he's going to show us. But yeah, I mean, for me, that I like interaction. You know, I run a Halloween haunt here. I some of you guys know that. The Halloween side is all about interaction. I'm hoping and pushing for more interaction on the Christmas side. You know, we're not going to get mazes. You know, that's just a Halloween thing. But, you know, as they walk up to your, I think Bill Porter has something as that the show is completely dead until there's people walking by, and he has an AI camera that picks it up and says, okay, turn on the show, boom. So it looks like the show is made specifically for that person. That makes people feel special. I think there should be ways to do that with your show now. I know that there's some people incorporating it, but I want full-blown use of that kind of action movement in the Christmas side. And again, some of the vendors don't agree with me with that. They're like, hey, that's why we have Halloween. That's more the interactive side, but I think Christmas can also be the interactive portion of that. Not sitting on people's laps and stuff like that. You know, that's but I guarantee that there's a way to doing it. I think there's a guy that has the box where you put a Santa letter in, and then it tells you you're on a good list or on a bad list. That's really cool. Simple stuff like that. But I definitely, that's the technology I'm looking forward to incorporating more into the Christmas side.
All right, folks. Well, I'm way over on my time, so like I said, I'll cut all of our panelists loose. I know a lot of us will hang out. We're in our social hour now. Thanks to all of y'all. It was such an honor. Like I said, when I started up with this idea, I didn't know who was going to tell me yes or whatever, but everybody was gracious. Nobody turned me down. So everybody was very gracious and it's willing to talk about the future. I think it's an exciting topic. I think that we do take it from here and ask some more questions and keep the conversation alive, because it seems to me, like I said, one of those common themes was how do we all work together, from the software, the hardware, the props, the core, everything else. All these things are interlocked. And I think as we move forward, we have to kind of step together and to work together and to see what it's like. So interesting conversation. It's been great. I've loved it. And like I said, I appreciate like I said, the fact that we got 150, 200 people here, listen about the future is pretty cool. So thanks to all of our panelists. So I'm definitely not cutting things off. I'm willing to sit here and talk as long as y'all want to, and feel free to open up your mics and ask questions. But like I said, I did want to cut these guys loose because I kept them twice as long as I said I would. So thank you.
Thanks, Russell.
Yeah, thank you.